Okay, Dan, the items for discussion, Commissioner Langley has the first one.
Okay, then, Mr. Manager, you can correct me if something I say is off base. All the vehicles that the county owns belongs to Beaufort County and the citizens of Beaufort County. And my problem is I've had 3 different complaints. And so I'm bringing them to the forefront. The first one is as a sheriff's car being in Pitt County, running 78 miles per hour with a child in it, taking the child to school. To me, that is a misuse of county property. And it's my understanding that this officer was stopped twice by the North Carolina Highway Patrol for running 78 miles per hour with a child in the vehicle, taking the child to school. Then another call that I received was that the sheriff's department vehicles were being used to take their spouses out to dinner in Pitt County. And then the one that I witnessed myself was a county car being used to take a personal pet to the vet. And so I think all of these are misuse of county vehicles. And I think we need to come up with a way to rectify this. Any thoughts from any other commissioners?
I've had complaints from citizens about the sheriff's department and the use of cars. Part of our problem here, and I objected to this at the time because I knew where it was going, is that there are too many of the sheriff's vehicles are unmarked. Sheriff needs a few unmarked vehicles, but half that fleet doesn't need to be unmarked. We've had, in the past, about 5 or 6 years ago, we went through a program of identifying every county car. So when you saw it going down the road, you know what department it was, at least going down the road. And this is just a part of good management of those vehicles that we have. We have no policy that employees can use county vehicles for personal use. There may be a few approvals of county vehicles that are taken home when somebody's on call or something. But I think the way to start this may be to say to the manager, give us a list of every employee who is approved to take a car home.
Okay, and one of the things that I really want to stress is, and I realize in anybody's job that there are certain times when emergencies happen and you may have to do something like this, but to be 2 weeks in a row driving 78 miles per hour with a child in the car, that's just unexcusable. That's a lot of liability for the taxpayers of Beaufort County. And personally, I cannot sit by in good conscience and just say, well, that's just the sheriff's department. That is not so. Those vehicles belong to the county of Beaufort. And if something terrible happens, then the county of Beaufort is going to be liable for it because we knew about it and we allowed it. And so I'm just simply sounding the alarm.
My understanding is the Highway Patrol stopped this vehicle.
Yes.
Twice. Commissioner Brown?
Yeah, I worked for the Department of Transportation out of Hosky for 4 years, and the state has a policy, a written policy, that when you're issued a vehicle, you're also issued a list of things that you can do and can't do with it. And if you're reported for breaking one of those regulations, you could be fined or lose your job. So, you know, that's something we need to look at. I have to agree with Mr. Langley on that.
And I'm going to say this. I'm going to say this, and I haven't talked to the officer. As a result of this trooper doing his job, he was forced to leave Beaufort County because he called and complained. This officer had been working for 26 years, and because he dared to question the folk at the sheriff's department, a call was made to Raleigh, and now he's out of here. That is so wrong.
You know, one of the things that's been talked about here in the past, and the sheriff's department bailed out on it, it wasn't the present sheriff, it was the sheriff before him, was to put tracking devices on, just like everybody else that's running commercial vehicles. Almost everybody has these things. is to put tracking devices on all the county vehicles so we know where they've been. I have personally caught people in Pitt County that are supposed to be working, going for lunch at their mother-in-law's, leaving the other side of the county, taking a county vehicle and driving it a long distance. We have been very slack on this, and I think we've got some serious problems here, and we need to get into it.
Does these new vehicles, Brian, do they have GPS on them?
Not that I'm aware of. I mean, we have some of our county vehicles, and again, when I say county vehicles, I mean vehicles that we control. You know, what I'm hearing is sheriff's office vehicles. I mean, Commissioner Richardson may have alluded to a county-owned vehicle, but
We control the sheriff's vehicles. We own those vehicles. These taxpayers, we go through this all the time, Mr. Manager, and I'm not going to put up with the fact that we don't have control of the sheriff's vehicles.
Commissioner Richardson, I'm not going to argue with you about it. I'm just telling you that, yes, the county owns them, but as I recall, and I'd have to research that, and I understand this is an issue with the sheriff's office. However, there is an opinion, I believe, by the Attorney General's office that says the sheriff is a statutorily elected, constitutional elected official. And he has the ability to do with his employees how he wants them to do.
I thoroughly disagree, because his statutory authority goes two places. In the Constitution, it says it very clearly. It says he has the authority, he is to serve papers, and he is to run the jail. The reason that sheriffs do police work is because they were the logical person for it to be turned over, and we have evolved into what we have today with sheriff's departments. The county commissioners, county owns those vehicles, they're under the supervision of county commissioners, and Mr. Langley is right. If there is an accident and somebody is off with a child somewhere, he runs into somebody and kills them, and he's not where he's supposed to be, we're still going to be sued just like he hit somebody on Market Street out there. And Mr. Manager, I'll say this to you. I'm not running from this. You are paid to help us not run from this. You are not paid to defend the sheriff. There's another statute, then I'll shut up and be real quiet and give you time to speak. There is a statute that says that county commissioners are required to give the sheriff what? 2 cars and 1 deputy. That's what the general statute says we're required to give the sheriff. The rest of the things that we give to the sheriff are things that we give based on what we think need is and what we think he needs in order to protect the public. So we are very much in control. It's gutless county commissioners that won't exercise their authority is what the real problem is. Now I'll be quiet.
Brian?
Just to clarify, it is not my job, and I am not defending the sheriff. What I am trying to do is help the board clearly understand all of the ramifications and all of the issues surrounding it. It is not as cut and dry as it may seem. We're happy to have that conversation. We're happy to look into that. We're happy to have the legal opinion look at that. But my understanding is once you provide those vehicles, and you're right, those vehicles and the liability that attaches with those vehicles is under your county insurance. And if there's a wreck, we pay that insurance. We pay those claims. But my understanding is once those vehicles are turned over to the sheriff, he operates them as he chooses to operate them. And for you to stop that, you just, I guess, take the vehicles away from him. So, but the sheriff exercises control over his employees. They are, by legal opinion, they are not county employees. They are officers of the sheriff. They are extensions of him as a constitutional officer. So
this doesn't fall under his part of the constitutional duties that he's been delegated. He is delegating constitutional duties to serve papers and run the jail. The commissioners delegate to him the rest of his duties, and those are county delegated duties.
Commissioner Brent?
When the sheriff's department wants to dispose of a vehicle, they have to come to us and ask if it's okay.
when the sheriff's office disposes of a vehicle, it's a county-owned vehicle that comes back through surplus. And it's just like any other property.
So
It's
we're
county-owned
responsible
property.
for the vehicles.
You are responsible for the vehicle, but the deputy driving the vehicle is not your employee.
Well, I understand that,
He is
but the
a,
vehicle belongs to us. the vehicle does belong to Beaufort County.
That's correct.
So if, when they get ready to dispose of a vehicle, they come to us and ask us, I mean, that tells me that the vehicle belongs to us, and we can tell them to do what we want to with it.
Boys, if this is a fiefdom, maybe I need to run for sheriff.
Well,
If it's a fiefdom.
Please, don't do that.
let's, does any other commissioners this way have any? Yes, Commissioner
It
Evans.
just seems like to me, from what what Brian is saying, is that if they're chasing the bad guys, I don't want them to get to the Pitt County line and slam on brakes. Or they're following a drug deal or whatever. I mean, it sounds like again, you give him a job to do. Are we trying to say just don't stay in the confines? I know the speeding is one thing, but we shouldn't be telling the sheriff how to police Beaufort County, should we?
Well, that is not the complaint. The complaint is having a child in a county vehicle driving 78 miles per hour. That is my complaint.
Personal use.
That's a
Personal use.
I mean, because basically, I was a deputy sheriff for 14 years, and we never did such a thing. Yeah, there were exceptions when the sheriff would say, okay, because you're in this situation, you can do X, Y, and Z. But never was it okay to put a child in a vehicle and drive almost 80 miles per hour. That does not make any kind of sense. That is straight up dangerous.
Commissioner Booth.
Well, I drove a state vehicle for 20 years, and I couldn't do what I wanted to with it. I mean, when I had to, if I was working in Washington and wanted to go to Bellhaven just to have lunch, it was forbidden. If I was working down there, I could go have lunch in Bellhaven, but for us running all over the county, do what I want to do, and if I drove it out of state, I had to get a clearance to drive it out of state. And if I was I worked, at one time I worked 100 counties, but when they cut it down to 9, that vehicle shouldn't have went out of one of those 9 counties that I was assigned to. Not like Gary, I wasn't fined. I was fired if I violated it.
And let me say this, as a deputy sheriff has the authority to arrest in any county in the state for a felony that was committed in Beaufort County. So therefore, there's no way you can restrict a deputy to Beaufort County. Again, I'm saying that is not what I am complaining about. I'm complaining about the safety of a child in a county-owned vehicle running 78 miles per hour.
Did you have any?
I'm gonna stay out of this conversation.
Uh,
I got my own opinions on it.
Brian, do we have a policy relating to driving cars home, or?
We do, the county does.
Okay.
I mean,
Okay.
and we have employees who are emergency response employees or who are on call for the water department, those kind of things, that may take vehicles home. But if we find an employee who is misusing a vehicle, and if you see an employee misusing a vehicle, please let us know and we will address it. In fact, we are putting AVLs, automatic vehicle locators, on our EMS units. We've already put that last year on, or this year, early this year, on our water department vehicles. So we are doing those things. Again, I don't control the sheriff's office. And you know, I don't, I'm not here to fight about that, because, you know, I have my job, and my job is not to control the sheriff. He is an elected official, and if his constituents don't like what he's doing, they will not elect him to office. But you know, personally, from a county management standpoint, I have no control over him or his employees, because they are not county employees. So if the board is concerned about those things, which I hear you saying you are, then we need to work to build that relationship and to talk about some things, or, you know, whatever other measures you may choose to look at those vehicles. I mean, I don't know what that is right now.
Katie, will you put on the agenda for the next month, December, to ask Chief Rose if he will come in and make a report?
Whoa, why don't we ask the sheriff to come and make the report?
The chairman's prerogative is I can ask Chief Rose to do it. If he chooses for the sheriff to come in, that'll be fine. But he normally is the person that comes in and speaks on behalf of the sheriff. So,
This is the weenie, all I've seen in here is a bunch of people running from responsibility.
okay, we're going to move down to your next item, Commissioner. I'm sorry.
I want to say one thing, though.
Okay.
When it comes to law enforcement vehicles, one thing I do know is that there are a number of vehicles that law enforcement will be unmarked for investigative purposes. So we have to be very careful. We're going to start saying, we're going to give you a car, but you're going to have to mark it to show it's from the sheriff's office. So that's one thing I want to bring up. And if I could suggest something, you may want to have that meeting in the county manager's office before you bring it to the board. There's one suggestion I would make.
Cover up, cover up, cover up.
Okay, you're up with the solid waste exemption list.